Hey, so the last time we ended up with Horace and Will back at a picnic where the orphans got together again during a festival, and they basically get in fights, and the battlemaster from the battle school comes by, catches them, separates them, and there's that. So, what I felt after that video that I didn't do justice to what happened to Horace. It wasn't just a simple bullying of, "Hey, you're a baby." It was actually more to it. So Horace in the battle school, the third years, it was just three of them. They were making fun of him, but they were also making his life miserable. One of the things that they would do is wake him up in the middle of the night, make him do ridiculous challenges such as going to a river, holding a huge rock on top of his head, and counting up to 500. And under the threat that, oh, if we catch you not doing that, we're going to make you do it again, and you're going to have to do a longer count. And that was the type of thing that they would do, or they would beat him. So they were very harsh things that they were doing. And the thing is that Horace is a great student. I mean, at the battle school, not only does he know the drills by heart, he does them well, he knows the strategies, but the battle master, when he sees Horace, he's always covered in bruises. He always has cuts and he's bleeding. So his impression is that Horace is bullying other students and is getting into fights, which isn't the case. And why this is important to the battle master is that he sees that Horace has potential. The way he describes it is that he is a natural. He has the instincts for this. Uh, the difference between somebody who practices swordsmanship and combat and all, they can become great. But somebody who's a natural, they already have the predisposition. So with the right training, they can be even better, which is dangerous because if we're talking about somebody with that potential, if they have a poor character, give them that right training, and now they're very dangerous because almost nobody can stop them. And that was his concern. And so for Horace, his impression was that Horace was someone who was fighting, so he might have to kick him out the school. And fortunately, he had the sense of feeling that there was something off, that didn't seem right, despite his impressions. And he didn't kick him out. He just simply kept his distance and kind of keeping an eye. Um, how much of an eye are you keeping? Is somebody's getting bullied in your school? Who knows? But that's kind of like the thing. Now, there is an occasion where they go into a boar hunt. Holt and Will, in one of their um, walks or expeditions, they find a trail that belonged to a large boar. The boar in the books are not like the boars in real life, like in Hawaii or in other parts of the world where they can be kind of small, they can be slightly larger, but usually they're not huge animals. Well, everything in relation to who you're comparing them to, but usually they're not like very tall. And if you are face to face with one, probably you're not gonna die, probably. In this case, however, we're talking about massive animals that can crush your bones. And so they mount this expedition, this hunt. Will and Halt, as the rangers, are going to lead them over to the lair where the boar is located, and they're going to be followed by hunters that are comprised of kind of like the village people. But then you also have the actual soldiers that are going to be carrying their lances and their swords and whatnot. Horace is invited to this hunt. The Battlemaster thinks that it might be good for him, good, and also get him some experience. And as they're there, obviously there's some tension between Horace and Will, but they keep their distance. They're not looking to fight each other at all. In fact, they're actually both nervous when they get to there. Will thinks that he is very frightened and that he is the only one. When he turns and looks to Horace, he sees that same fear in him. So it's not just him. As it starts, they do get the boar to come out. They rush it with the lance. Dead. Okay, very good. However, a second boar that they didn't expect comes out, and while the hunters and soldiers are with the first boar, Horace and Will are basically alone, and that's where the boar is headed. Horace instinctively puts himself between the boar and Will, which is very brave because he wasn't armed and he isn't even prepared to remotely defend himself, let alone kill the boar. But Will is also brave. Will, knowing that his bow and arrow are not strong enough to actually pierce the flesh, he goes ahead and just uses it as a distraction. As he distracts the boar away from Horace, he runs away so that the boar gets farther and farther away from Horace. In the moment that the boar was about to run over Will, Will's horse drops by, kicks the boar, and Horace is also there. He's ready to fight the boar, and that's it. There's a long shaft that you can see on the side of the boar, and that's just because Hall was behind them and he had shot his arrow, which had a heavy point and was able to pierce the skin. After that, they became very good friends. I mean, they shook their hands. They said that they were going to put the past behind them, and not only that, but Horace tells Will that because of what he did, that he saved his life, he is in going to be at his service whenever he needs a friend or whenever he needs help. He's going to be there, which is awesome. If you read the scene, it might sound like I'm downplaying it because, well, it's something that you have to read to kind of understand the emotion, because it's farther than just, oh, now we're friends. It's, we went through this danger together, we're comrades, I respect you, you respect me, we have this bond, and it's beautiful, beautiful. Anyways, when Horace goes back to the school, and you know how rumors start, so the story, instead of staying at, you know, Will, uh, that there was two wars and the second war was killed by Holt and all that, the story became Will single-handedly killed both wars. I mean, it there were more changes done to the story, but it basically ended up that Will shot an arrow and they both killed the boars. Oh well. But the the third year students that were bullying Horace used this as kind of like a pretense to keep on bullying even harder. And so now, not only were they beating him and waking him up, now they upped the antics, and Horace had to constantly kind of avoid them as much as possible. And they did eventually catch up to him. And what they did was horrible. I mean, it was vicious. They immobilized him by putting him inside a bag. They beat him almost to until he was about to lose consciousness. And when they stopped, he was barely able to hear them say that they're going to go after Will. And so Horace, as much as it pained him to move, he got up and followed them to save Will. And now Will was just practicing. It was one of those days where Hall had to do another affair. Uh, Will was just target practicing. And seeing these three battle school students come by, he thought that they were maybe friends of Horace's, and he didn't think anything of it. But as they moved on closer and closer, and they started talking, he started to get a sense of danger from them. So he started retreating. But being three, being focused on one, the other two can sneak by. And that's what ended up happening, and they were starting to beat him. Horace fortunately got there on time, just so that they could stop. But now, being the bullies that they were, they saw, well, We're three, he's one. We can do it. And that's when Hulk comes in unexpectedly. Where he came from, who knows? And that's part of like the mysticism about Rangers. They come and go, but people don't really seem to see them when they come and go. So it's part of like their magic, magic. Anyway, so Hulk shoots an arrow to one of the sticks, and he basically has the three boys stay. Rather than what they thought he was going to do, saying, go back to the battle school and keeping the peace, Hulk just said, you know what, we're going to make this even. And he had Horus fight them one-on-one equal terms. And it was beautiful as well. They would strike, 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 strike. Horus, with contempt, he would block them, deflect them, and then once they were tired, bam, 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 he left them on the ground. Not that, but kind of like spanked, in a way. And then to the next, and then the next. And so it turns out that Holt had a talk with the battle school master, and he explained the situation of what was happening. Which he was glad, because he finally knew that, okay, his instinct that something wrong was happening with Horus was true, and that Horus wasn't being that vicious character, that there was actually something else going on, which is great. His life improved. He still had to do the drills and all that, but still, the three bullies ended up being expelled, and not just that, they were taken out of the kingdom, and they were told, if you come back, you know what will happen. Bye bye. And they were given provisions for like a month, just so that they wouldn't starve. But they were banished from there. Great. And after this event, this is when Horus's and Will's friendship really consolidates. They really are the best of friends, and if you mess with one, you are going to mess with the other one. And I'm not joking. I read the entire series. Or about the entire series. He had new books published, so I'm not sure how many books there are now, but I read at least the 10 books of the series, and yeah. Now, not just that, but as they continue on, they're developing their skills even more, they're being masters. Halt even tells this other ranger, and he even says, Will is actually one of the best archers, even by ranger standards. So he's actually getting very good. And now it's time for the gathering. The gathering. I definitely know why some of the content creators that I see kind of do that close microphone thing. It is kind of fun. Anyways. So, where was I? Oh yeah. So there is this once a year event with the other rangers from the rest of the kingdoms, where they come together, and the apprentices are tested on their skills and their abilities, as well as like knowledge and other stuff. But they also gather around, they listen to music, they eat, they have fun, but they also update their current knowledge. Because you have to remember, rangers keep a database of knowledge about the kingdoms. Because it's part of their functions to kind of be aware of what's going on at all times. And at a moment's notice, be able to use that information to resolve a situation. Which is part of their value for who they are and what they do. And so on their way, there is kind of like this game that Will is kind of prepared for. And what it is that every year they try to catch Halt off guard. So on his way there, one ranger will always try to sneak up on him and kind of go like, aha, gotcha, you didn't see me. That sort of thing. And so he prepared Will for what they would do. And so as they are getting closer, they notice that somebody is behind them, not right behind them because they have to maintain a distance to not be seen. But what ends up happening, Will gets on top of his horse. He stands on the horse, and once he passes on a tree, he climbs up all the way to the top. And as Halt is serving more as a distraction, the ranger comes up and he makes himself known. The ranger's name is Gillen, and interesting note, he was the former apprentice of Halt. So they catch him off guard. Not Halt. Will shoots an arrow to one of the trees next to him, more than anything to say, "Hi, I gotcha," more than actually hurt him. And they all three travel over to the gathering, and they are made aware of a few different news, including that there's two Karkara that are walking and running about, right? So their mission is to chase them down. Calcara are, if I can get the description correct, imagine a 7-8 foot tall beast with the body of a gorilla and the face of a, I think they said face of a dog. Massive creatures, powerful, very evil, with a stare that will paralyze you, and interesting, very afraid of fire, mortally afraid of fire.
Deadly.
So that's their main weakness, fire. And so they're off to the chase. Now, since they can't really deal with just the Carcara on their own, what they end up having is Halt, Gillen, and Will are given the mission to chase them. Chase them not to kill them, but more to know where they are, and therefore be able to lead soldiers over to them to do what they have to do. And that's what happens. They follow the trails, and they end up passing through these. It's a structure, a massive structure, that they call the stone flutes, which is very similar in the way they describe it as kind of like this ring of stones that nobody knows where it came from, similar to Stonehenge. And well, let's say that they have luck catching up to the Calcara. But, and that's the big but, what ends up happening is that Will travels away. He's given the mission to run off to let the soldiers know where they're headed, because they have a map, right? And they know what they're up to. And I think that's kind of something I kind of neglected. But in this world, there is this character that is feared as much as Lord Voldemort from Harry Potter. This character called Morgoth. He did many things that were terrible things, but he was banished many years ago. And so what you have is Morgoth. He is that ever-present danger, but it's not just him. He also had his servants. And you can think in terms of the Calcara were their servants. It's kind of hard to find like an analogy, but if you ever read Harry Potter, then you would know that one of the things that they were afraid of is Voldemort getting into contact with the giants, because he had a way of convincing the giants that they've been sorely mistreated by wizards and to join him to fight against them. Well, the Calcara, while they might be weak to fire, they're also weak in the sense that they can be bought with it was either silver or gold. But if you give them those either of those two, either like you give them silver, you give them gold, they'll do what you want them to do. And so something that they notice is that the people who are in charge of planning the counterattack that brought Morgoth down, those people were dying. And one of those people happened to be Halt. Now, Halt wasn't really thinking that far ahead that, oh, they're going to go against for him. He was thinking more of who's next on the list. And so that's kind of how that's why they kind of sent Will for assistance, because following the trails, they found out where the Calcata were headed, and they could kind of tell, what is the next step, who was going to be next. So that's why they sent Will and said, okay, meet us over at this particular location, and we'll be chasing down the Calcata. So Will goes on the two horses, and I say two because Ranger horses are very resistant. They're very endurance. They have a lot of endurance. They can do cross country, and they can sprint that cross country all day and for many days. And so the way that they had planned is that Will had two horses. One was his and the other one was Galen's. That way he can alternate and not tire the horses that much. So he'll ride one horse, and then after I think it was 4 hours, he would switch to the other horse. Another 4 hours, then switch again to the next horse. So that way both horses didn't have to kind of like carry him the whole way, and there was always a fresh horse to keep him going. Now, Will does get to that. He reaches where he has to reach. He comes over. Gillen, of course, is on foot, so he's still not there with them. But when they reach where Holt was going to be, they see that something happened because one of the Corcara is down, and there was also a lot of blood. And the concern was that Holt might have been dead. And what happens from there is that the Carcara that was down, it wasn't dead, so they had to finish it off. As they are looking for Holt, and obviously Will stays behind, not just because he's afraid, but also because Sir Rodney and Baron Arold, these are two characters I didn't mention, but Sir Rodney is the battlemaster at the school, and Baron Arold is in that kingdom. He is the person in charge, but he is a former knight. And so they chase down and they look for Holt. They find Holt. Holt is very wounded by the second Carcara. And Baron Arold and Sir Rodney, all three of them, including Holt, they get paralyzed by the beast, and they're doomed. They're going to die. However, Will is able to actually, he's far enough so that he's not under that threat, but he's also close enough to actually shoot an arrow and make something happen. What he ends up doing is he's able to get fire on an arrow. There's this like liquid, like a tar, that he coats his arrow with. He lights it on fire. He shoots the Carcara, and the Carcara explodes. It incinerates instantly, which I have to call fall play, because if you know in real life, if you talk about incineration, such as when somebody dies and then you're going to turn them into ashes, it actually does take a little bit over 2 hours at very high temperatures to disintegrate bone. But the Carcara was instantly vanished. I don't know. Don't ask me. But finally, they wake up. They're able to get Hall away from there. They meet up with Gillen. They're back in the kingdom. And, Will is a hero. Even when Will says, I didn't do anything, I was far away, that's why I wasn't under a spell and I was able to do something. And I only shot one arrow. Even when he was honest about what he had actually done, people still had a high esteem of Will. They saw him no longer as the orphan boy, but now he's actually the ranger. Even though he's an apprentice, but he's a ranger. This is where we get to the end of the book, where they have this ceremony where they call Will so that Baron Arold can properly thank him. And when he gets up to the castle, and there's people already expecting him, and there's people in the hall, and Baron Arold tells him, your acts are very courageous and you have done a lot of good. Let me give you something in return. I'll grant you one wish, any wish that you want. But of course, it's not just any wish. What Baron Arold had in mind was what Will had asked him from the very beginning, before he became the Ranger's apprentice. Um, if you remember back, or I don't know if I really made that clear, but when they were choosing the masters, it's not just I want to do this, I'm going to become your apprentice. The master has to accept the apprentice. And when Will had said, I want to become a soldier, I want to go to the battle school, Sir Rodney, the battle master, had told him, you can't. You're small, you're weaker than most of the boys. We cannot have you, because you would just be a weak link in the chain of the army. And so he was not accepted. And also due to the fact that Holt had also claimed as wanting Will as his apprentice. But he did give Will that chance. The Baron Earl told him, if you want me to, say it, and I'll send you to the battle school. And he even presented him with a shield with a coat of arms, which was the boar's head, and also this beautiful sword. But Will, even though this is what he had wanted, it was what he had wanted. He no longer wanted that. He no longer wanted to be a soldier, an apprentice in the battle school. He enjoyed being a ranger. And that's what he shows. He said, no, I want to be a ranger. Halt, being as non-expressive as he is, he was really happy. Holt was happy about this. Now, what we do get to learn as Will is on the porch where he lives with Holt, he learns the truth about who his dad was. I had already referenced that he was just a farmer and all that, but Paul tells him the whole story. He knew him better than most, not because he knew him for the longest time, but because when what had happened with Margaret happened, one of the things that went on was that the beasts that Margaret could control mentally, I'll get to that in the review of the second book. That's where they come up. But basically, these massive beasts who are single tracked, but they only respond to the mental message or mental orders from Morgoth. And so there was an attack where those beasts were actually about to kill Holt. He was in a very precarious situation. However, Will's father, who had grown up as a farmer and had gotten into battle school as a regular soldier, Well, actually, he didn't even go to battle school. The way he says it is that because they needed soldiers, he enlisted. He became not enlisted. He got recruited, became a soldier, became a captain, and then without any of the training, he was, he was awesome. These beasts who usually make other people fear them, because of the way that he was fighting to protect Halt, they were afraid of him. That's how awesome he was. And the promise that Halt made to him was that he was going to look after his wife and son. Unfortunately, the wife was mom. She died during giving birth, and Will was all alone. So Holt had taken Will up to Baron Arnold with the other orphans. He had accepted Will not because of this. His duty was take him to Baron Arnold, make sure that he had a proper place to sleep and eat and be educated. And that was his responsibility. But knowing how honest Will is, that's what made him want Will as his apprentice. Obviously, this is a lot to take in. Learning what you learn about your father if you've never known them and have this ideal image, to learn that your father was more than that. He was even greater, bigger than your imagination. It's a lot to take in. Halt leaves Will with his own thoughts and gives him a little present. You see, Rangers have two classifications, two systems. You have the bronze leaf, and then you have the silver leaf, oak leaf. Anyway, the bronze means that you're an apprentice. Well, not an apprentice, but you're kind of like in that basic level. Once you qualify to have the silver leaf, that means that you're on equal foot, you're on equal standing as the other rangers. No one ranger is above the other. In a sense, I mean, it's not like you have like the king of rangers or anything like that. I mean, the idea is that once you get to a certain level of mastery and expertise, you're on equal footing as everyone else. Your brothers, your comrades, you are a unit. So, uh, despite not being able to be tested, but everything that has happened, it has showed that Will is mature and that his skills are indeed, that Will basically does deserve to be recognized as a ranger. And that bronze leaf meant, it means quite a bit with everything that has happened and everything that is about to happen. He really is growing and becoming the ranger that Halt expects him to be. All right, so that is the end of book one. What I will say is that this book is pretty good. I mean, I enjoy this book. I enjoy reading it. It's a really quick read as well. I don't think it's that many pages, maybe like 200 or so. But I find that this, and not just with this books, but all the other books, they do a good job on not just focusing on one character, because in certain moments of the book, they would be focusing on Will, then they would focus on Horace, Will, and then Gillen, and I mean, it does splits into a few characters, yeah, so that you get the perspective on different perspectives on a situation. I would highly recommend anybody who wants to read this book to read it. It's fantastic. It's great for children. It's also great if you're not a child. I mean, it does have that. it's not written in a way that's too fantasy like. There is some realism, and there's also, if you like this type of themes, such as with what you see with Star Wars, Harry Potter, where you have this history of something bad happened, and then you're in this kind of like this weird piece or weird place where place in time. There's weird place in time which everything is calm, but right before a storm, but everything is calm in the meantime. And that's the type of thing. And the hero kind of has grown with what has been told by the past, but they don't really know of the dangers. They don't really understand it. And then they're being prepared for the dangers that happened in the past, but it's kind of like a trial and error with everything that happens. And that's exactly what happens. In this book, it's about growth. It's about forming friendships, but also understanding that sometimes what you want to be is not who you're meant to be. That the only way to truly understand who you are is to act towards moving forward with the opportunities that you're given and with the opportunities that you have at hand to become that person that you're really meant to be, and that you can surprise yourself with what you can do. If you're a student, you might be able to understand this, regardless if you changed majors or you haven't, or you're not really sure what you want to do, or if you at first wanted to be, a doctor and now you're thinking about doing something else. You really don't know until you are moving forward with what opportunities you have at hand, what you can do. So with that, I'm going to stop this recording because it is too long. If you have any thoughts on your own thoughts on the book, and you would like to express them, or you would like to continue a discussion, start a discussion on it, feel free. I don't think anybody is watching these videos, but if you do, feel free to leave a comment. Say, hey, I'm here. Let's talk about this. All right. Well, see you soon, and we'll probably talk about the second book. All right. Bye-bye.